Hi guys, and welcome to another devcast. Today it's going to be a Dash devcast. I'm sure you know that we didn't have any for like 2 months probably. So I want to bring some new features that are inside the 0.6 version. Currently it's in 0.61, but this applies obviously for the 0.6 and up. I'm going to talk about three features. First is the new IAnimationNodeBindable. It's more about the UI. The interface is just behind how the UI is implemented. So if you're just working with Dash, you don't really need to know about the interface. But I will show you what it means and how it brings a new type of UI inside Dash to help you prototype UI animations. And if you can, if you have, for example, your own nodes, you can use it to implement this interface as well. And then I'm going to talk about two new features when it comes to expressions, and that's a custom expression functions, which you can call from the expression evaluator inside Dash, and then custom macros, which are basically a predefined expressions that you can then use um, in any expression you want to, or a part of expression as well. So let's jump right into Unity. So this is, as you can see, is a 0.61 version, and I have a screen with a few buttons. This is the pretty much the example screen I'm using through many of the videos, and I created an empty graph on the screen. It's a bound graph, and it has just one input. It's start input that is called by the dash. There is a variable. I can remove it. I don't really need it. I just tested something. So it's an empty graph with an input. So let's start, and I will show you a new feature outside of the animation node bindable, but let's just show you some new stuff that all correlates together. So I want to create an animation for this title. So I will just select it, and then I have this new create for selected, which will basically tell us let us pick an animation node that we want to create for a selected transfer, because it's thinking that we want to animate, which we want to. So let's select an animate anchor. As you can see, what it did is not just created the node, but it also retargeted it to the title and then bound the from position and to position to the current position of the title inside. So if we don't do anything, it will not do anything. It will just stay where it is when it was created. And this, as you can see, is a new interface that's tied to the eAnimation node bindable. And what it let you is basically during editor time bind this interface to the selected, or it doesn't really need to be selected, but it will. If you select it, then it will automatically select it, but it doesn't really matter because does know about its target, and then when you edit the target, it will reflect the changes inside the node. So for example, let's say I want to animate it, the from position. I will just tell the dash that we are animating from position. If I change this, you can see the from position is changing, and then I can unbind and I can then preview uh, this local animation. This preview is just for the animation inside this local node. It's not as a preview here or as an instant preview, because instant preview will just start as a normal preview, and if there was some kind of output connections, it would run the output connections and the whole graph potentially. This just runs the animation inside an animation node, so it previews the single animation. I can also bind it to the to position, and what it did is automatically change the transform to the current value we have here to bound position. I can just switch it, so it automatically prepares you. Okay, I'm editing to position. Let's select it to the to position and let's edit it. And as you can see, I can then edit it. Okay, I can go back and edit the from position. I can preview it. Then I can, obviously it will also preview if in the standard preview as well. I can unbind. So what this does, it's implemented on some of the animations, like for example as well as scale, and you can then bind the current scale. If I had a target, currently this has no target, so it thinks the target is screen, obviously, because that's the default target that comes into the input. So let's shine a little light how this all works. You can see that, for example, I cannot bind from here. That's because I'm not using from. If I selected that I am using from, I would be able to bind it. Another thing is that uh, if I'm using expressions, it will automatically disable even the preview, because we are not trying to resolve expressions that may have a data that comes through the graph, and it may be obviously invalid. So there is no need to use a local thing for a preview or try to use it. I may potentially play with it a bit, so we could try to evaluate the expressions, but there is a high probability that the expression wouldn't be able to evaluate, obviously. So that's why I basically disabled this functionality if there is any kind of expression in the to or from. Uh, Another thing is that it's not yet implemented on all the animation nodes. I will add it, but currently there is like 4 or 5 of them supported, so you can use those, and I will add all of the that are doable, because not everything is bindable, obviously, inside the zero dot 6 iteration. Uh, so look out if there is some kind of animation node that didn't have it, that don't have it yet, and it will definitely have it in future if it's doable. Another other thing I want to mention here is that to achieve this, I had to implement the basically the lookup for the retargeting. So what it does, it's if I click here, as you can see, it will automatically select the title. What it does, it doesn't really look at this retarget. It will be as simple as this, because this is just a reference, and it will have to be easy. But for example, let's say I will show you. I have a retarget to children. I'm using retargeting using a string. So let's just do this, and the lookup, obviously the selection currently is only for the animation nodes. I may add it. It's very simple to add on any other nodes, but I think it's a priority to have it to for animation nodes, because okay, I want to work with this transform. It's Let me know in a feedback that if it's feasible for you to have the retargeting for all the nodes. But what I wanted to show you is this, if I do something like this, I select it, it will automatically know that I am looking inside here. I'm looking inside buttons, which is this one, and I am actually on iterating its children. So it automatically looks up the first children. So yeah, and then I can change its transform. I can even bind it, and it will automatically apply for all these children. So uh, even if you have some more complicated retargeting going on, it always tries to basically find out the input chain, as I call it, from the node to the start. There can be cyclic chains, so if there is a cycle inside the chain, it will currently it's not handled, but it is easy to handle. So in this iteration, it will get handled, and it will not try to resolve cycled reference or chain, because it's not doable. Then and if it resolves it automatically selects it, and it will work for you. Another thing I want to mention here is that these bindables will not work for a relative position, because it's if you have a good idea how it should work for relative values, I'm all ears, because if I, for example, if I bound the position as relative and then I move it for, okay, so let's say this is the 2 and this is the from. If I switch it to relative and then let it like this, it would jump here because this is the relative position and it will jump here. If I let it like this during the graph startup, I would need to bind it to the final position so it would always work. If this is a premise that we can work with, we can make it work for relative positions if only one of those is relative, because then I can calculate the relative value from the other, which is absolute value. But currently, the premise that the chaos with the which I just basically said with the relative positions working with runtime and how it basically works, I disabled it for relative currently for relative values because it's a mess. So I just let it work for absolute positions. So another thing is that we have what I showed you with the create selection. We can even do this to create faster or prototype faster, let's say. As you can see, it automatically knows that we have 4 buttons selected. I created, and it will retarget to all of them. I created 4 animation nodes. I can also select them and tell this start node that I want to connect it as output. And then I can just go and bind front position, and then I can run it. So it's really fast to prototype. I can bind this and run it. So that's how the interface works. I will show you the actual interface. It's very easy. If you have an animation node, which is animation node base, it inherits animation node base, and you implement this interface to it with all these functions, the dash will automatically create this preview for you. As you can see, it's inside preview, and this is a new interface. Uh, so if you want to implement it, you can. This looks like this, for example, for the rotation. It's really simple. For example, I'm just telling it that if it's expression and it's relative, we shouldn't be able. This, as you can see, this was when it was doable for the relative position. I'm going to disable it for all the implementations to not work when it's relative, because as I said, it's a chaos. So if you have any new like ideas about how this should work, uh, don't be afraid to let me know, because it's a very complex UX and UI issue how to handle this, so it's a good workflow. I actually designed a lot of tools during the years I've worked on games and even before, and there is still a lot of things that some people like really surprise me how something can be really simple and I didn't really came up with it. So let me know if you have an idea like, okay, I would really like to for this to work differently so I can prototype faster. Most of the time, the feedback I get is minor changes, and a lot of the people don't know that the minor change would have a huge impact on something else. But as I said, don't be afraid. Just give me a feedback. I will think about it, and I will definitely let you know if I don't accept the change. I'll let you know that why I didn't accept it. It's because there is always a bigger picture that how some things work, and we need to keep them all in mind. So, as I said in this video, I also want to talk about custom expressions and custom functions. So I will just sorry, my mic in. I just resetted it to the default position. And one thing that comes to mind right away is a multi-selection working with this. Let me know. I have it in a wish. Okay, I will let you know that I have it in a wish list. So I am definitely looking forward that so we can basically select and at least preview. And the binding would be could be problematic. For example, like binding three of them and selecting two of them, and there are a lot of edge cases, a lot of edge cases. But selecting four different animate nodes, animate anchor nodes, which are the same, we should be probably able to edit at least the properties, similarly how Unity does it. So you can then, for example, switch this to relative and work with the, or for example, I wanted to change the time. Now I need to go like this. I can use variable, but I would really need to go through all four of them. And if I had this option, so let me tell you, I have this in a wish list as I said, so I will definitely work on that. Okay, let's delete this and let me show you the expressions. I will use a very simple node for this. Is a debug node because debug node, the new debug node from 0.5.4 is you can have expressions, so we can test any expressions here as well. So first thing is that most of you know that there is a lot of functions inside Dash that you can use inside expressions, like random, for example, or creating vectors and stuff like that, or random values on circles. But there was a feature request from some of you that you would like to call your custom function inside the expression, something like this. Okay, I have some function. I can even do this. Doesn't really matter. You wanted it there. So this function, if it's not found inside Dash, because the native Dash functions will always have precedence, so you cannot override, for example, random f. But it's doable if I chose to do so. So you could just switch the prioritization. But at the moment, all the native Dash functions have a priority. And if it's not found and you enabled custom functions, it will look inside your classes. So let's try it out. You have this Dash expressions editor. And as you can see, we have classes, expression classes, and expression macros. Macros is the second topic I want to talk about, so let's just start with the functions. Functions or the classes are by default disabled. Why? Because as any evaluation of expression or of functions inside expressions, it will use reflection, or even the native ones use a reflection to call during runtime. So, and if I just enabled it, and there were some defined, it would try to resolve the functions inside the classes, and it may have a small runtime impact. So the lookup itself and so on. So that's why I decided to make it explicitly enabled, or so you can enable it only explicitly. It will not be implicitly enabled. So let's start with a expression class. I have one, so I will just add it. I called it custom functions, and it's automatically there. So it will call using a reflection a custom function inside it, and it will try to look for test. So if I run it, uh, okay, I just debugged the test as a text because I didn't switch it to expression. So you need to obviously run it as an expression. So it's a test, and what it did is actually debugged two things, which is strange. Okay, let's just clear it. It's not strange, but let me tell you why I did that. Because I have a custom debug saying here inside the test function, and 0 is actually the return value of the test function. So this 0 got written to a debug by this debug node because it just returns obviously the result of the expression, and this here was a custom debugged by me inside the text function. So let's just look into it. It's a very simple class with a static test function. So we want to define your own functions that you want to use in expressions. It always needs to be bool. So that's if it's actually resolved or not. If it's not, it will return false, and it will obviously return an error, or it should return an error. It's up to you. And then the input is a function args, which is all the arguments that come into the function. If I had like this, it will not resolve because as I said, we are just expecting 0 parameters. But you can use function args and define your own custom functions that have function parameters. So it's up to you. I'm just checking if there is no parameters. If there are, I could then show an error. The error needs to be set on the expression functions static class. Because that's the one that's used by the expression evaluator, and it will always tell during runtime only the first error that it encounters. So there is no really a reason to have multiple error messages inside multiple static classes. So always set this single error because that's the error that there is only one error that will be shown. If there are multiple errors and you solve one error, obviously the second one will be shown and so on. It's go like that, so it's not a mess inside the trace. Then you can say that okay, it has a result, and the result is 0. As I said, the result was what the debug has shown here, and then I have a custom debug log, so you can try like debug your functions if you want to. You can even breakpoint them and so on. So it's very simple to specify your custom expression functions. Okay. Another thing I want to talk about is the expression macros, because there are a lot of times that you have some expressions inside your dash graph that you are using in multiple nodes. So the feature request was, can I like save some expression and then just use it in multiple nodes? It is doable using the custom functions, but as I said, this is using a reflection, and why? If we just want a macro, like an expression saved somewhere. So we can define a macro, which will be an expression. It can be even a value. So let's say is 0.5, and macro, okay, like new, doesn't really matter. We could use the predefined macro name, and then if I want to use it in expression, I cannot do this because it will tell us that the variable was not found. Why? Because if I just specify like this, you can have a macro new variable, so it will resolve as a variable. If it's a macro, it needs to be wrapped inside these curly braces. So now when I run it, it will show us the value. You don't see these curly braces here because they are added implicitly by the system. So if you have a name of macro, it needs to be inside this. So, and obviously there are things like you cannot have two macros with the same name. As you can see, the dash automatically rename it if you try to use a name that's already existed. And you can also have functions. So if I just enable that and I had this function test, I can use it inside the macro, and then let this macro be as is, and then run it, and it will return 1, because test, as we saw, return 0, and this is +1. You can have any number of functions, any number of macros. inside the expression. You cannot have a macro inside the macro. it's my it's one of the funny limitations, one of the limitations of the old programming language I used. So that's why I added it, and it's really way simpler to resolve. So it's doable to have macro inside macro, but then I would need to run the regular expressions that do the magic continuously until there are no macros left. And at the moment there is only one layer of this regular expression replacement. So you need to have macros without another macros inside them. Again, these two features, as you can see, or you cannot see nowhere, the preview warning, like you saw, yeah, you see here, or you saw inside the IAnimationNodeBindable interface. So these features are outside of preview stage, and they should be completely stable inside the 0.6 branch or version of Dash. So if you run into any issues, let me know. And as always, if you run into any ideas what to change about this, even though it's not really about the UX here, it's the functionality of the expressions. If you have some kind of features that you would like to see that relates to expressions, just let me know and I will work on it. This is not something that will change in any major way, at least during the 0.6 iteration. But if there is some like really good idea, I will definitely think about it and add it to a wish list. So that's all for today. I hope you guys enjoy Dash, and if you have any feedback about Dash, about anything inside Dash, basically about anything, just let me know. So I'm always here to talk about it, to get the feedback, to work on the feedback, to especially I like to work with the guys that create the graphs and animate UIs because that's the hardest part to grasp. The programming part is easy, but how it should like iterate or work with the UI and especially shortcuts that and other things. There are a couple of shortcuts inside Dash, but I definitely want to work with more shortcuts so we can speed up the prototyping phase. That's why I created this create for selected. This may even though be renamed to something more like telling, but it will be there. If there is nothing selected, it will not be there, obviously. So let me know, and we can make this way better, especially for faster prototyping. So it's not like really, you know, tinkering with stuff, but really fluid workflow. So I'm always here, so let me know. Thank you.